The Bungie of today is an embattled studio mired in endless controversies, but that wasn't always the case. The Bungie we've got now is a very different beast from the one of the past. It's easy to forget, but at one point the studio was very highly regarded, not just because of the games it made, but because of the positive ways it interacted with its fan base. These are the guys that made Halo, Myth, The Fallen Lords, and Marathon, the original ones from the 90s, not the currently in development extraction shooter that's been delayed multiple times and is still dealing with the fallout from a major scandal. Those games all have rabid, highly active fan bases that are still alive to this day. The original lore drop, marathonstory.org, was created back in 1995 and is still being updated to this day. Halo is still a beloved series despite its missteps under new management from 343, and even Destiny, which is often pointed to as the beginning of the end of the studio, still has some incredible highs, even if today mostly what we hear about is the lows. At one time, Bungie was just on top of the world. They had it all: an active and passionate community, multiple extremely popular game series under their belt, and the respect and praise of the entire industry. Hi folks, it's Falcon, and at the height of Bungie's power, you would never imagine this studio in the state it is today. So today, we're led to ask a simple question. What the hell happened to Bungie? And I know there's going to be somebody who's like, that's a simple answer. It's Destiny 2. And that is the easy answer. It's been a long, slow decline for the studio ever since it launched back in September of 2017. But that's just it's an oversimplification. It's not wrong. I'm not going to argue with people who say that. But you make a video because there's more to say than just that, right? So the first small little contradiction that you have to deal with is that as much as we all complain about the game now, there is a reason it lasted so long, and that is it is one of the few rare live service success stories in the industry. It has gone on to become one of the best-selling games of all time. It's in the top 12 highest revenue games on Steam. On its own, Destiny 2 is a massive success. And if you ask Bungie fans, everyone has a different answer for when the fall of Bungie really happened. It's easy and perhaps more accurate to say Bungie was doomed the day it was acquired by Sony in 2022, but obviously for older fans it started much sooner than that. Maybe things actually started going bad when they went independent and signed a 10-year publishing deal with Activision. Or maybe it goes back further to when Bungie was acquired by Microsoft in 2000, which was seen by certain parts of their fan base as a blatant betrayal of their roots as one of the rare few Macintosh game developers. They were originally Apple and went to the dark side of Microsoft. I think the safe answer is to say the studio has changed pretty significantly over the years, but they've remained weirdly consistent given how often their status changed. Sometimes they were independent, sometimes they were owned by the big fish in the pond like Microsoft, or, they had a publishing deal with Activision, but for all intents and purposes, they had basically operated like they were owned by Activision. They always made good games, though. Marathon, Myth, Halo, Destiny, even something smaller like Oni. They're legendary games for a good reason. During their time with Microsoft, they made 5 Halo games, and they were all very good. It was after they left and Microsoft retained the rights to Halo that the series began to decline. For decades, the studio had that Bungie magic. Even when a project seemed like it could be a disaster mid-development, they'd pull it together by the end. And even in their early days, Bungie has always been a studio defined by chaos. It's just how these early fly-by-the-seat-of-your-pants studios operated, and it worked up to a certain point. You can see it with the way they used to interact with fans, the way employees used to talk about Bungie. It was a place full of passionate people working their butts off to make the best games possible, and while that inevitably led to a ton of crunch, it seemed like for the most part people were generally excited and positive about working there. They had a uniquely anti-corporate culture that made them a desirable working environment for many would-be video game developers. There's, of course, a darker side to this sunny exterior with accusations of abuse and harassment that came out years after the fact. You see this sort of thing all the time from developers that have that kind of startup spirit. The transition from a bunch of friends working together to an actual business with employees and serious obligations is something a lot of long-time development studios have struggled with and continue to struggle with. How many times have we heard a studio justified its terrible project planning by saying, it all come together in the end because of that magic? Any post-mortem on Anthem is going to mention BioWare's magic or that BioWare magic or whatever. Bungie is the same. If you've ever played a video game, you know that magic is not an infinite resource. Most games in which you are able to control magic, you have a meter, you have magic points, Point is, it runs out. Bungie was able to avoid it for a long time, considering just how much of a pain pretty much every single one of their games ended up being. The production of Halo 2 is still legendary for how much of a mess it was, but in the end, it all came together. They made it work because they were passionate about a game, and they had a highly motivated staff operating at the top of their game. 20 years after Halo 2, and Bungie as a studio is almost unrecognizable. Many of the most respected members of the staff have been let go because of layoffs. Their entire internal QA team was let go, for instance. The guy behind Destiny's incredible music, Michael Salvatore, is gone, and Martin O'Donnell was long gone at that point. You can't expect people to stay around forever, especially in a creative environment like game development, but the Bungie of 2025 is a demoralized, battered studio, unable to pull off the miracles it was once capable of. And to be clear, the fact that basically any of the Halo games came out in a workable state is kind of a miracle. I wouldn't ever have called them a particularly healthy game developer. They've always been operating on a wing and a prayer, but at least up through the Xbox 360 era, they were able to make it work despite being their own worst enemies at times. This is where the specter of live service games rears its ugly head. Some developers have been able to make live services work. Epic bumbled into success with Fortnite Battle Royale, and they recognized what they had and quickly reorganized their business to feed the live service beast with constant updates, new game modes, and of course, tons of microtransactions. Say what you will about the game, but they were able to meet the moment and make it work. Bungie, on the other hand, has always struggled with game dev. You don't even need to read the background details to know things went very wrong with the original Destiny. It was such a bare-bones game at launch with story content that was clearly chopped together in a desperate attempt to salvage what they had. This was a consistent problem with the studio. Their games always have the telltale signs of being rushed, but they're otherwise so good that it could be overlooked. Myth 2 Soulblighter had a devastating bug where if you installed the game to anything other than the default folder, it was, you'll find this hard to believe, but if it was uninstalled, it would delete your entire hard drive. Halo Combat Evolved has you repeating almost half the game. Halo 2 had even more cut out of it than Halo and ended on an abrupt and satisfying note. Destiny 2 had its entire original campaign mode removed from the game because of Bungie's sloppy development practices. Their method of making games by the seat of their pants generally worked when they were making complete games, but the live service model requires planning, it requires consistency and long-term project management. They can't get by with a culture of chaos, making Destiny 2 a forever game. But instead of addressing their long-standing internal issues, executive indifference won out. Destiny 2 since launch has been a roller coaster ride. Sometimes the game is great with expansions like Forsaken, the Witch Queen, or the big finale to the Light and Dark storyline, The Final Shape. When they absolutely had to buckle down and make something good for the game, they generally managed to pull it off. But that only usually came after some kind of unnecessary boneheaded disaster or a complete flop of an expansion. Keep in mind, Lightfall was so bad, it actually hurt sales on The Final Shape. The grand finale actually sold less than Lightfall, even though it's significantly better in every way. There was a 30% decline in sales between Lightfall and The Final Shape, and the next expansion, The Edge of Fate, is performing even worse somehow. The peak player count on Steam is just a third of what The Final Shape managed to scrape together. For many long-time Destiny players, the previous expansion was the perfect jumping-off point, a conclusion to the long-running Destiny story. It was a satisfying conclusion where you beat the darkness, and as I have talked about quite a bit lately, live service is based on the principle that you cannot satisfy your customers. You can only almost satisfy your customers. When you satisfy them, they don't need more. If you have a bowl of cereal for breakfast in the morning and it's enough, you don't need a second one. But they're still trying to release expansions, and not long after the conclusion either. The story's over. It's time to move on. But inexplicably, Bungie is trying to set up an entirely new storyline, even though the game is clearly on its last legs. Sure, there's some Avengers Endgame parallels here, but it's not just Destiny 2 fatigue that's hurting the sales of the latest expansion. It's also that Bungie is still making the same mistakes they pretty much always made. They rush to implement major changes fans don't like. They push exploitative microtransactions over making a rewarding experience, and their communication with the community keeps getting worse. Like, they're struggling to put out something as simple as a roadmap. It's kind of hard not to look at Sony's $3.6 billion acquisition of Bungie and go, I've made a huge mistake. Because it's damaged not only Sony's reputation, but Bungie's reputation. A lot of former employees have alleged that Bungie management massively overinflated the studio's value, promising Sony that they were working on 5 major AAA games and a Destiny movie. If they hadn't been acquired, things could have been much worse for the studio. Also, at least one former employee alleges the studio was in such dire straits if they didn't get bought, they would have faced insolvency, which honestly tracks with how Bungie has behaved post-split with Activision, releasing expansions that were somehow lighter on content than ever before while pushing players to spend more. They were somehow able to do the impossible and make Activision look like the good guys. The frustrating truth here is that Bungie, well, maybe not rosy-eyed and excited for the future, that maybe has changed, but in many ways they are still the same developer as before. How they do things is the same. If they want to be serious about making a live service game, they have to do more than that. The industry has changed. The budgets of games have skyrocketed, and the increased graphical power of modern cards requires more manpower to get out a game that's on time and incomplete. It used to be possible for them to skate by on Bungie Magic in the pre-HD era, but that kind of game dev just doesn't exist anymore. It doesn't work anymore. And it's crazy because so many of the problems they struggled with and eventually solved in Destiny 1, they just repeated with Destiny 2. They do one thing right and follow it up with a colossal blunder that would require a ton of unnecessary time and effort to fix. They always seem to be in a rush, which has led to a lot of sloppiness. Another example of just how bumbling these guys can be is in regards to a lawsuit filed by a sci-fi writer who alleged Bungie plagiarized the Red War storyline from their work. Normally, it would be a pretty open and shut case, but the entire Red War campaign was vaulted. It's just no longer playable in Destiny 2's updated engine. So Bungie's legal team relied on YouTube lore videos as evidence, which was seen as inadequate by the judge. Like, they put themselves in a situation where they were set up to lose by deliberately just removing content from the game that they didn't even remove because they thought, oh, this might be a problem. They removed it because, I don't know, that was the primary story campaign of the game when it first launched. If you get a Destiny 2 disc and install it, the game will update itself and you will not be able to play the Red War, the thing that's on the disc. It's just a black mark. This vaulting, it's black mark on the reputation. It doesn't help. No matter how many excuses they make justifying removing content from the game, comes off hollow. A lot of long-running MMOs have all the content in them from when they originally launched, or in something like World of Warcraft's case, it's still possible to play the old version of the game despite how much has changed over the years. I don't know what Destiny 2's excuse is. And indifference and incompetence aren't excuses. I mean, they're explanations, but definitely not excuses. Those excuse nothing. With so many game developers, all the stories you ever hear about are how the mean old publishers forced them to do this or that unpopular thing. The publishers mandated they make an unnecessary sequel or force a mechanic or mandate live services, but with Bungie, it's kind of all on them. At least that seemed to be the perception, at least with so many of their worst decisions coming after they became independent from Activision. You could blame Microsoft for cracking the whip with Halo 2 and 3 and causing members of the team to flee after years of brutal crunch, but for the most part, the bad decisions of Bungie come straight from the studio themselves. Like, normally, the Sony would be the obvious bad guy post-acquisition, but the prevailing opinion seems to be, instead of being cruel corporate overlords raiding a beloved independent developer, Sony's kind of being seen as dupes that were more or less tricked by Bungie management, who took them for all they're worth and then bounced at the first available opportunity, which does track as Bungie's CEO Pete Parsons left in August of 2025. The prevailing theory about the brutal job cuts isn't that they were mandated by Sony, but were instigated by the studio's leadership in order to meet certain revenue goals as stipulated by the Sony deal so that management could get larger payouts. Just to be clear, those stipulations will be proposed and negotiated by those people and may be how they sold the inflated value to Sony. This is all alleged, it's speculation, there's no definite proof, but it does line up with what former developers at Bungie have been saying. Along with Sony's plan to purchase Bungie, the original plan was for them to stay independent. But as the studio increasingly failed to produce results with the many projects they started up after joining Sony, the PlayStation leadership has been stepping in and slowly working to integrate the studio into their network. Generally, and I can't imagine why, it seems like Sony has not been happy with Bungie's performance under their banner. During an earnings call with investors, they stated pretty clearly that Destiny 2 has fallen short of expectations, both sales and player retention, and because of that, they're recording an impairment loss of $204 million against their $3.6 billion acquisition. All this really means is that they're lowering their expectations for earnings from both Destiny and Marathon, which is kind of a problem considering those are the only two games being made by Bungie at this point. Destiny 2's upcoming expansion, Renegades, probably is not going to turn things around either. It's one of the most baffling things I've ever seen. It's a Destiny 2 expansion that is Star Wars themed. The fact Destiny 2 has been dipping its toes into crossover content is embarrassing enough on its own, but a full-on IP promotional expansion is next level stuff here. I mentioned I'm against intellectual property. I don't like all of this incentive-driven need to include various things that belong nowhere near. Again, this is something I've complained about a lot recently. The whole idea is to create IP that you can then rent out, and this is the result of that. This is the real estate model of video games. Don't like it, not a fan, and honestly, it's a new low. Imagine World of Warcraft dedicated an entire expansion pack to The Hobbit.
We're vaguely inspired by this thing, so we're gonna do an expansion pack with it.
It's so many levels of stupid. I hate it. You got Sony involved, you got Disney involved, you got who knows who else involved, who knows who approached who or whose dumb idea this was, but there's incentives that essentially make this kind of stuff completely inevitable. It's always going to be a race to the IP bottom. And here, it's one thing to have out-of-place character skins in a multiplayer game. That's a problem we're currently dealing with pretty much everywhere. But man, is it an interesting idea to throw lightsabers and the Force into a completely different universe's story campaign. It's not like Star Wars is at its height of popularity at the moment either. Like, this feels lame on every end, honestly. Stinks of desperation. Not just from Bungie, but obviously this is what Bungie looks like in general these days. More and more it feels like the success of Destiny is what's going to eventually kill Bungie. It's a Pyrrhic victory of a series. It made Bungie very successful for a little while, but because it's a completely different type of game that requires a different organization, or, organization in general, it eventually became an albatross around Bungie's neck that they just can't escape from. They can't make new games, they can't experiment with new ideas. Now they kind of just have to be a content mill to keep the Destiny beast fed, and they were not equipped to handle that burden, nor did they reorganize to become equipped to handle that burden. Let's not even get into that infamous 2022 GDC presentation with that beware of over-delivery slide after fans have been complaining for years about Bungie's consistent issue of under-delivering with their expansion. These days, it's pretty easy to paint Bungie as the bad guys, but the one thing fans agree on is that the actual people making the games are not to blame for Bungie's woes. Time and time again, we've heard stories of people at Bungie trying to get long-standing problems fixed and arguing for things that fans actually want to get essentially ignored or even sidelined by management. Developers had to fight hard against terrible ideas like making Destiny 2 a subscription game. There's a lot of sympathy out there for the people actually working on the game on a day-to-day basis at Bungie, and for good reason. It's not their fault. Or if you absolutely have to fault them, the blame shouldn't entirely rest on them. Remember, these are people with jobs, lives, families, rent, bills, and their own set of various subscriptions that we all have now. Like, they have to live. This is the life that we exist in today, and they have these jobs for that reason. I'd like to end this on a positive note and say the future could still be bright for Bungie, but it's going to take a lot. I don't see Marathon pulling up from the tailspin it's currently in. I don't understand how Destiny 2's expansion could bring people back. Maybe they'll put out a Destiny 3 and learn from the many mistakes of their previous games. But the way these things go, these are not the most likely of possibilities. My kind of hope is that after Sony just fully takes over the studio, the imposition of some kind of actual organization helps us get decent stuff out of them. But the fact is that can't be Bungie. They're already no longer the same guys who made Marathon and Myth. They're barely the same studio that made Halo. They're basically just Destiny Incorporated at this point. And while their shooting game is still impeccable, impeccable. Destiny 2 is a game far past its prime in Marathon. I just don't see how Marathon is going to turn things around. So what the hell happened to Bungie? I mean, you could say live services, but live services isn't quite it. To be frank, Bungie had success with live services. However, they didn't accommodate their own success. They just remained the same. Yeah, we'll get it done eventually. We'll use that Bungie magic. Like, there's a certain level of stubbornness there. And it's stubbornness on an executive level. Because again, we know that devs have argued. They've tried. Live services is a pressure cooker environment. And again, you have to be set up for it. Like, Bungie both succeeded massively and failed in equal measure. For a while, that was fine. But the more people bailed, the more they were forced to cut corners and squeeze their existing player base, the less it worked. It brings the phrase to mind, you either die a hero or live long enough to become the villain, and that seems like, unfortunately, what we're seeing with Bungie now. They're not dead, and they could still turn things around, theoretically, but oh man, it'll take a lot of effort to undo the general negative sentiment surrounding the studio. Like Durandal said, escape will make me free. If they somehow get out of this, they could come back better than ever. I don't want to say that's impossible, but possible is not the rosiest outlook. What do you think, though? Leave us a comment, let us know. If you like this video, click like. If you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week. Best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription, so click subscribe. Don't forget to enable notifications. And as always, we thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. Click the join button for the 1% Club and listen to the Falcon Show. We'll see you next time, right here on Gameranx.